Hi, my name is Mick Rankin, and this is Conservative Chat. I'll bring the issues of the day, give good common sense discussion. I believe we get emotional on a lot of issues, and if we look at the whole picture, we can digest the various points, find where truth overcomes emotion, and bring some sanity to our discussions. Please feel free to comment. I will read all of them. I won't respond to personal attacks, but I will try to reply to every real concern, sometimes individually, or as on a group, or on the next podcast. We may not agree, but we can agree to disagree. On today's podcast, I will discuss the Inflation Reduction Act, which we now know was really the Green New Deal Act. On this segment, we will discuss one important aspect that involves giving breaks to big business, specifically big banks, while gaslighting the American public about how big business is not paying their fair share. Well, I find that problematic because you can't claim that people aren't paying their fair share if you're giving them tax breaks. So, to get started, I want to reference two news articles I saw today, one from Reuters and the other from the Wall Street Journal. Both were published yesterday, so the information is fresh and brand new. Both highlight an issue that I believe has been going on for a while, even though it was just reported on. Both articles reported that wind energy companies were selling their tax credits to a large bank to raise money more easily for their projects. Essentially, these companies applied for and were granted federal tax credits under the Inflation Reduction Act because they intended to build more wind energy farms. Well, rather than holding those tax credits and applying them when they started making a profit, they decided they should sell the credits to a large bank. Now, their rationale for doing this was that they needed money to start the project because they didn't have it. They would figured they would not make any significant profits for a number of years, so the tax credits really wouldn't provide them any benefit immediately anyway. So let's discuss how companies raise cash, because that's kind of at the heart of the issue here. Most companies, especially new ones or startups or small businesses, do not have extra cash on hand to start new projects or expand existing operations. To get capital needed, they do one of several things. They will go to a bank and get a loan. If they're a publicly traded company, they can offer more stocks for people to buy and raise money that way. Um, or they can find a private investor who will put up cash. Now, in all of those instances, they owe money back. They will either owe money back to the bank via the loan plus interest. They will owe money back to their investors on publicly traded companies because those investors expect a return on when they buy a stock. And then finally, if they have a private investor, same deal goes there. They're going to have to pay that private investor back with some interest, or that private investor is not going to put up any money. Getting a loan is probably the most typically common way most startups and small businesses get capital to start a business or expand their operation. In lending the money, the bank assumes some risk for that project. And the same applies to those who are buying stocks or for a private investor. Now, if you're invested in the stock market, you're watching that because you buy a stock and it starts going down, that's some risky where you're losing some money. So, all of those instances, there is risk involved for whoever's providing the money. So, the interest rate they're charged or the return rate of return that they're expected to provide is dependent upon the size of the company, the project, and the level of risk to pay that back or provide the rate of return, and of course, current interest rates, which right now are fairly high. So now we've got that getting cash for projects covered. Let's talk about tax credits. And I'm going to come back to this in a minute because I've talked about how how they get money and they have to pay it back. The intent of tax credits is to influence companies to build projects that fit a government priority, often used to entice companies to move into an area for economic development and job creation. That helps the economy grow in a local economy. It provides jobs. It provides a better uh, cost of living for the people that are living there. The idea is the company will assume some financial risk for embarking on that project to fill that public need, but the government steps in to help ease that risk by allowing them to pay less in taxes until the project is stable and making profits. In the case we are talking about today, companies are not using the tax credits themselves. They are selling those tax credits to a financial institution. So remember when I talked about having to pay back when they get money? Well, here's an instance where they're using a tax credit to sell to a financial institution that incurs absolutely no payback. They just get money. Rather than taking out a loan from the same bank, they just get money from the bank. No payback required. This gives them the funds to start the project without having to pay interest on a loan, which is also called debt service. And the reason that the energy companies gave was that they would not be making a profit right away, so they would not be paying taxes on anything. So tax credits didn't provide them any immediate benefit. They would go unused. And there would be no taxes paid on that. So it really didn't matter whether they had the tax credit or not. They felt if they could sell those tax credits to raise capital, then they could get started faster. Well, without debt service, they would also see a profit sooner. Without that debt service, they would have money with no payback whatsoever. Now, I don't know about you, but I don't remember anybody ever giving me money without expecting me to pay that money back, especially with interest. Okay, it all seems to make sense until we start realizing a few things. One, the large bank has no risk in that wind energy project. They just give up money. Less risk is good for the bank's customers and shareholders, um, but there's no consequence if the wind energy company fails to succeed. They have no outstanding loan. They can't default on anything. They can just pack up and go home and take the money with them. Large bank is getting tax credits that were granted for the purpose of building renewable energy systems. Well, guess what? The bank's not building any renewable energy system. They just get the tax credit and use that for whatever profits they get. So that's a little bit problematic in that the tax credits that were given for energy systems is being used for the bank to write off profits. That's essentially what it all boils down to. So here's my take on this. The money that those companies are getting from the bank actually belong to the American taxpayer. Those are tax credits issued by the federal government, and those tax credits belong to us, the taxpayer. So if they sell those and they get financial reward for selling those, that money actually belongs to the taxpayer. It doesn't belong to them, but they're using it anyway. They're using it for themselves. And like I say, they could just pack up and go home and say, I got money in my pocket, you know, and I don't have to pay back a loan. So there's no oversight, rules, or requirement to refund if they fail to produce. They get halfway through the project, decide everything's too expensive, China's charging too much for materials, we can't do anything else, and they just stop. We don't get the wind energy, and they get to keep the money. The deal is being allowed and promoted by the same administration that has been complaining that uh, corporations are not paying their fair share in taxes. Well, that's what I meant when I talked about gaslighting the American public. Here they are complaining about how large corporations are not paying their fair share and the wealthy are not paying their fair share, yet they're turning around and give tax breaks to them for purposes other than what those tax breaks were originally intended. So I'm not real happy about this. And I think that we all ought to take a look at this and understand that when we go to the ballot box and we vote, that we are not voting for the folks that are going to turn around and give away our tax money and give tax breaks to those same people they say aren't paying their fair share. I believe large corporations and the wealthy do pay their fair share. In fact, the government's own tax office says that 80% of all the tax revenue collected is by the top 20% wage earners in the country. So it's not that they're not paying, it's that government's not using it effectively and they're giving away tax breaks, they're giving away our money, and then complaining that they don't have enough. So remember that when you vote. I think that's important, and listen to what the candidates had to say and how they're going to spend your money. Okay, that's all for this podcast. There'll be much more to come. If you like it, please subscribe and get the latest podcast when I post it. Thank you very much. Mick Rankin signing off.